to hear from you. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Beth, and it's a pleasure to be here. I think I've been watching some of your seminars, but without participating, sharing my own knowledge. So this is my time. Thanks for the invite. So we start sharing my screen. Oh, yes. So I hope you can see everything on my screen.
Yes, looks good.
Okay, cool. So as Beth just mentioned, this is a study about identifying the sources of erosion in one of the catchments in Rwanda in the northwestern. And I think this is very timely to share the tool that we have used, known as sediment fingerprinting, as we are celebrating the World Water Day, Forest Day, and World Meteorological Day in this week, I think, and last week. And yeah, I will be taking you through the technique we've used, but also the study was part of a project that I have conducted when I was still working with BirdLife International. And I will also include some parts on the entire project itself up to the end of the project, including some of the interventions that we have conducted. So the content of this presentation, I will explain why did we conduct sediment fingerprinting, so we understand what it consists of. And I will describe the site, the study area, and we will go through into details about the sediment fingerprinting approach. And I will include the community consultation that we have done after the scientific research. And I will conclude by sharing the take-home message. So this research project, which was implemented by BirdLife International, the climate change program, and we had some collaborators in the project. We had a team from Uganda, from the National Fisheries Resource Institute. They had some experience on the Great Lakes region. So we have collaborators from the Yale University, and we had the collaborators from Rwanda, the former Rwanda Water and Forestry Authority. So, and then we conducted the research along with the other project activities, and we developed a paper which was published last year in December in the Journal of Environmental Monitoring and Assessment. So I have invited one of my authors, Mark Magnifica. I'm not sure if he's on the call yet, but Mark Magnifica is currently the Director General of Land, Water and Forestry at the Ministry of Environment. So he has very well collaborated on this work. So talking about why sediment fingerprinting. So I will play a video that I recorded in 2019 when I was doing this research. And you may have seen this video on my. I would say that I have presented this in other previous meetings and conferences in Rwanda. So you may see some of the pictures that you are familiar with, some of the videos that you are familiar with that you've seen on my social media pages. So I will play the 3-minute video.
You ever used to swim in the river when you were a child? Well, I used to swim in the river when I was a child. And in most of the cases, this river water is also polluted, is plenty of sediments. It's much fun to swim in the river, but you can imagine all kinds of health risks associated when the river is not clean. In Rwanda, we are facing the problems of river sedimentation. And this sedimentation is affecting many ecosystem services that we get from the river. For instance, when the river is polluted, when the river is plenty of sediments, the amount of hydropower production is interrupted, is reduced. And the people who use this river for domestic use, for drinking, for irrigation and agriculture, they are also affected. So in my organization, we try to identify the sources of sedimentation in the river, basically because this sedimentation is happening as a result of erosion in the mountains when there is heavy rainfall, and these mountains are not protected against erosion. How do we do that? We use a very scientific tool which is called sediment fingerprinting. Sediment fingerprinting is a very interesting tool because it's a novel technique which involves collection of the soil in the upstream and the collection of sediments in the catchment. And at the end of the day, the tool allows linking the sediments found in the river and where they come from, their origin within a catchment. The sediments at different locations in looking at the hydrological networks, and we collected the soils looking at the geological units. Both these samples from the field, they go through the laboratory analysis, but also the modeling which produces the erosion hotspot map. So this erosion hotspot map is a final product of the sediment fingerprinting, and it shows the areas within a catchment where different sources of sediments come from. So it's a very important technique because it allows to first identify the problem and then later propose different interventions for controlling the movement of the soil into the rivers. In all of these processes, we engage the local communities, the farmers, the miners, because these people are the ones which basically contribute to different land uses in the catchment. And these land uses, mostly unsustainable farming, mining, do contribute in high amounts of sediments in the river under heavy rainfall. So we engage these people. It's very important to engage the locals because these people, they are also the beneficiaries of the services from the river, including irrigation, fishing, and agriculture. So you can really imagine how it's important to really find these sources of sedimentation in the river.
Yes, and that's the photo I was talking about, the kids swimming in the river. Of course, that's not that's not me in among the kids swimming, but sorry, but yeah, you understand what I was talking about, the risks of having the non-clean rivers. So I will continue. That's basically the summary of the study and the project itself. I was trying to quit and okay, great. Cool. So why sediment fingerprinting again? So as I already mentioned, this sediment fingerprinting, I mean the river pollution is already happening, so we can see it. This is Sebeya River, and you will see that this is where it empties its water in Lake Kivu. So the whole river is sedimented, is observed as sedimented all the way from its origin to the outlet into Lake Kivu in Gisenyi. Yes, coming to the description of the site. So the site of Sebeya Catchment, as I said before, so the catchment is located in the northwestern Rwanda. And as you see on the map, the catchment occupies a total area of 357 square kilometers, which is almost 1.3% of the total country surface. And as we do the water resource projects, we divide the catchment into the upstream and the downstream. So the upstream there, that's the part where the river takes source. So as you can see, Sebeya River takes source very close in the proximity of Gishwati National Park, which is a protected area and a tropical rainforest in the northwestern Rwanda. So from the upstream catchment area, you can see some of the small streams, not yet big as it is at the source. But as the river, so the main river is Sebeya in the middle with the a bit dense blue color. So the downstream is where all the water goes and is collected. So you see that the upstream consists of some of the districts like Rutsiro and Ngororero, while we have the downstream catchment covered by Rubavu district in Gisenyi. So the whole river water goes into its reservoir is Lake Kivu, again in the north, at the border between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. So it's a very important catchment because it houses a key biodiversity area, but it also empties its water into the Lake Kivu, which is one of the Great Lakes in the East African region. Yeah, so this is the study site. You see the main river and all the other affluent flowing into the main river. And understanding the catchment again, so the elevation range, this is the river Sebeya at its source, basically before it grows, it becomes bigger. So these are some of the landscapes in this catchment, and you will see that some of the hilly landscapes where the elevation ranges between 1,400 meters and 1,900 meters. And what you will also notice in the Sebeya catchment is that the main land use is agriculture, which occupies around 62% of the total catchment area. And you will see that the production is a bit good, including maize and the Irish. These are the very common, and the beans, common crops that they grow in the catchment. But so you see some pastoral lands, the areas which were the former Gishwati National Park. So these are some of the photos from the field, but within the catchment, just to have an understanding of the Sebeya catchment. So the catchment also, as I've said, it houses Gishwati National Park, which has been previously called the Gishwati Forest Reserve, but very recently, I think 2017, it was declared as a national park. One of the key biodiversity areas, similar to Nyungwe National Park and the Volcanoes National Park, tropical mountain rainforest. So this forest has been cleared in the past, the refugee settlement, and the very remaining forest patch are here on the photo. And you can see some of the figures as I extracted from the Benedetta's recent publication. So this is also this forest is very well inside the Sebeya catchment. Now, understanding some of the aspects, some of the things that you can see, some of the ecosystem services, and you see the people extracting the sand from the river, and this sand is actually transported to Goma, a very hot city in the DRC, close to Gisenyi, to Rwanda. Now, but you will also see some of the locals, some of the kids, the people fetching this water as they use it for domestic purposes, especially washing the clothes, or maybe in some cases also maybe washing, cleaning some of the food, like the sweet potatoes or the Irish potatoes. Now, as we have now understood the catchment, different aspects, we can come into understanding our tool, the sediment fingerprinting, which allowed us to identify where the sediments, the different soil particles in the river come from. As you can see, you see the sediment, the sediment, which is the soil deposited in the river, and the fingerprinting, which is like to trace or to find out some of the sources of something. So in this section, I will take you through the procedures that we have followed to identify the sources of sediments in this Sebeya River. So our sediment fingerprinting involved different steps, including the collection of the soil data. So as you understood from my talk, from my very short video, the sediment fingerprinting consists of trying to link up the sediments, suspended sediments found in the river with the origin in the catchment, where they come from. So we understand that this soil in the river comes from somewhere in the catchment. So this soil is transported through different water flowing during the rainfall, and this is very connected to the soil movement. So we've collected the soil data, and the soil data were collected following the geological unit. So before conducting all the fieldwork activities, so we have mapped out the catchment, the geologies, the rivers, the hydrology, all these things. We had the land uses, so we tried to understand the catchment. So ideally, with the soil data, we followed the geological units. So we had a map, the geological map of the catchment, and from this geological map, we had to collect the soil data, like 5 samples from each geological unit. So each geological unit, we had to visit each geological unit in the catchment and collect at least 1 sample from each geological unit. Of course, it's not difficult given the topography in the catchment, but of course we had to follow the GPS points, so we had to walk some distances to reach some of the points. So as you can see on the photo, if you can see the photo very clearly, one of the people collecting using the GPS is Tolina, I think, who was assisting in the field, and you can see him because he can remember all the distances we've been traveling to find a particular GPS point. So we calculated the GPS in the ArcGIS before going into the field. So we digitized different locations. Now, so we also collected the sediment data. So we did not dig. So with the soil, I forgot to mention that. So with the soil, sorry to provide, with the soil, we used to dig with a plastic material, avoiding the interference with any metal object with our soil data. And we tried to avoid any kind of contamination of our data because the data had to go through the laboratory analysis. So we had to dig up to 20 centimeters, trying to find a bit of a soil, trying to reach the parent rock, but of course we couldn't reach the parent rock. So we used to dig up to 20 centimeters and then collect that little soil and then try to make a radius around our point and collect in 5 different directions. So with the sediment, we collected the water and looking at where different small rivers enter the main river, and we didn't collect at the location where the small river enters the main river because that water is already mixed up. So we collected at 5 meters from where the 2 rivers meet, and we used to collect the water, not to dig into the river to take the soil, because we wanted a very new sediments, suspended sediments, because we can imagine that this soil in the water, suspending in the water, is new and a result of a very recent weather activity, rainfall or an erosion. So we wanted to really link up the suspended sediments with the very new, the current weather events. And as you can see, we've been working with the local people, with the government, with the communities to help reaching the sites, but also collecting the samples. And after collecting the water, it wasn't done like that. So we had to filter the water, so to retain the small, the suspended, the fine suspended sediments on the filtration membrane. So it was a very fine membrane, so to retain a bit of small particles. And this was also a process that was taking much time. So you can imagine some of my field assistants like Josine here on the photo. So we could spend sleepless nights because if the water was much sedimented, so it could take hours and hours to have all the water filtered. So we took a sample of 200 milliliters into a graduate cylinder, and we used to filter that 200 milliliters for every collected water from a location, a particular location. So we also were very aware of carefully storing and labeling the samples, because each sample again had to go through the laboratory analysis. Though the laboratory analysis wants every sample to be labeled to have a unique ID. So we had to put the date, the location, the name of the sample. So ideally we had like the soils, we had put the geology and the geology name and the sample number and the date and the district. And for the sediments that were stored in petri dishes, we had to put a label of the river name and maybe the date, especially the season sampling and the date and the river name. So this is the time when you remember that you had to do not sleep after field work, but spend some hours filtering the water, because we couldn't filter being in the field, but rather we carried the water at our lodging place to spend the nights and the evenings filtering and storing and labeling the samples. So you can see all kinds of equipment that we had. So we had to conceptualize the catchment. I'm not sure if you can see the map very clearly on my right side. If you can see the map, please let me know.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, you can see the map. So the map is a result of catchment conceptualization. So this was done after we had all the samples already in place. So sample and the location. So the GPS point was very important, because based on where we collected the water, so as you see on the legend, so the red are the soil samples and the green are the sediment samples. So you can connect the green with the small different streams and where they connect with others. So as you know, the main river has other rivers entering into the main river, and these other rivers have other small streams entering into them. So it's a connection of rivers. And so we can talk about main river and primary, other river and secondary river, and so on and so forth. And from these sediment sample locations, the catchment could be conceptualized into sub-catchments. So looking at only the people who have been to the field can quickly understand this. So looking at, so for example, if I give an example, so Sebeya is in the middle here, but looking, for example, this river, that goes, they go this way. From here, the upstream to the downstream, so they go this way. So like this river, this one, it has some other connected small rivers. So this river is actually one of the big affluent emptying into the main river. So from all of this, we could delineate the catchment into sub-catchment. So ideally, any sub-catchment corresponds to the either secondary river or third river after the main river. So for example, Funda, if you can look at Funda, which is this is Funda, this color. So this Funda is actually the sub-catchment is drawn around where the river drains, where it drains. So this is Funda sub-catchment. So this is concerning downscaling the catchment, actually. So the conceptualization will be important later in my presentation. So I will show you how it has been very useful to conceptualize the catchment into sub-catchments. And we have all the data now. So we had 30 soil samples. This means that we had 5 geological classes, 6 geological classes. Sorry, someone is yawning. Sorry, we had 6 geological classes in this catchment, and in each geological classes we had to collect 5. So a total of 30 soil samples means that we had in total of I couldn't display all the maps that I have created for this catchment, so it's a lot of maps. So we had a total of 34 sediment samples that we collected in the 3 sampling campaigns, if I can call them so. So we collected the soil once, so we assume that the soil property does not change throughout time much, but the sediment amount can change throughout time. For example, if it's raining much, you may have plenty of sediments compared to the dry or light rain season. So we had carried our field data very well stored and labeled to Rwanda Standards Board for laboratory analysis, where they had to determine the chemical composition of metals in our samples. So we have targeted the metals, and they used basically the equipment of X-ray spectrometer. So that equipment had allowed to give us the chemical composition for each sample in ppm. And then these laboratory results, along with the sample locations, the X and Y, the GPS locations, and the geological data, the layers, and the river layers, all these data, the GIS data, and the field data, and the lab results, they constituted the input into the Bayesian model that had produced results on how much sub-catchment contribute to the river sedimentation and how much geology contributes to the river sedimentation. So our friend from Yale University has run this model, and after that we could produce the erosion hotspot map. Again, I will not show all the steps such as the mixing model, but the mixing model had allowed us to show first the contribution to river sedimentation by sub-catchment, but also by geological unit. And then after that, from this different contribution that were displayed on the box plots, graphs, we also have produced the erosion hotspot map. So this was our final target for this study. And as you can see, you see different colors: red, yellow, green. Of course, green, it's a friendly thing, but the red is a problem. So looking at the legend of the map, you will see that so we've called different hotspots levels. So level 1 means that that location, that site contributes to more than 40% of sediment discharge, sediment load into the river. So level 2, so level 1 is very dangerous in the red color. So these are contributing much compared to the others. And level 2 contributes to 20 to 40% to the river sedimentation. And this is the yellow color. You can see also the corresponding districts and the sub-catchments. And level 3 is a bit much better, a friendly landscape. And level 0 is basically contributing to the negligible amount of sediment load into the rivers. So as you can see, we have also related different colors to the districts, but also considering the district area and the catchment. And we've seen that we see much red colors in Rutsiro and Rubavu, which ideally correspond to the much more steep slopes of the catchment. Yeah, so that's it. Again, I will not go into much details, but you can interpret the color. So the red is the major priority site that we would consider if we go into controlling the soil movement, the river sedimentation, but also the landscape protection in the catchment. So our study, our tool, our sediment fingerprinting was very important to show the priority sites in the catchment. But also, as you can see in this map, you can see that this is our descriptive. So basically, this also shows the role of a natural forest or a protected area in controlling the in the land protection, because it does not contribute to the river sedimentation. Now, so after our map, we had to validate. This means that we had to go to the field and conduct a visit to different areas in the red, in the green, in the yellow, and find out what are these things consisting of. So we've always collaborated with the local communities into the cooperatives, and we could visit different places. And our level 0 in the very red color, contributing to more than 40% of the sediment discharged into the river, they consisted of some of the sites, the steep slopes without erosion control. They still exist in the areas in the former descriptive forest. We also found that some sites along the river itself where there is illegal mining happening. So this make the erosion rates much more worse. So that was some of the interpretation after visiting the actual sites corresponding to each color. So level 2 was also corresponding to some of the sites without erosion control, but remember on the map, level 2 was the yellow color, so the middle one, and not too dangerous. But also level 3 was friendly, not too dangerous. And level 0 was actually much more protected landscape. So it included, the planted forest. It also included the tea plantations, and it included the natural forest. So these three land use categories, we can consider them as they maintain land protection, and they contribute less to or negligible to the erosion rates and hence river pollution. Now, after our results, we have conducted some community meetings to complement our scientific results. So at BirdLife International, we used to value the local knowledge, because, as I said in my video again, the local farmers, they were born and they grew up in this region, so they understand whatever happens than anyone else, than also maybe the scientific results. So we had to support our scientific evidence with local community consultation. So we have conducted the participatory meetings with the communities in this catchment, and where they were drawing the catchment, but also after drawing, we explained the Erosion Hotspot Map, and they provided some of the recommendations on how to restore the catchment. And of course, they agree that these things are happening. There is land degradation happening, and they have proposed some of the interventions. So we consider involving the communities, because they had also to be involved in the interventions on land protection, targeting the priority sites in the red colors. Of course, the red colors areas are huge, so we do not cover all of them due to the limited budgets in the project. And what we have done so far with what was available as budget for on-site interventions, we had proposed the tree plantation. It was also suggested by the communities. They suggested a number of items, but we could not cover all of them. So we chose some of them to implement, but also we had made some consultations with the local government, where we align our interventions with the government priorities as well. So this is the last slide, and so the tool is ideal to build on science-based results and conduct interventions on land protection. But the erosion hotspot map can be validated or reproduced regularly, where you would keep collecting the data. Of course, it takes time, and the entire procedure requires budgets because, for example, the sample analysis, one sample was analyzed at 45,100 francs. This is around $50, one sample. And ideally, we could have collected a maximum of sediment samples, especially collecting the different seasons at the same location, where we did not do that. So ideally, if there are continuous projects to repeat the same approach and keep collecting the sediment data and use actually our map, which is available online, where our paper is published. So our map is there, so it's geo-referenced. You can compare your actual results if you conduct a similar study with our results and see if there has been a change in the erosion amounts or in the land protection interventions. And with that, I will conclude my talk for now. And yeah, thank you for being there. So we hand it over to Beth.
Thank you so much, Providence. That was really fantastic to hear the explanation of a somewhat complicated project. You really explained it very clearly. And I think there will be people with some questions and comments. And let's see, I see one already. I welcome people to ask a question by unmuting. You can raise your hand if you want. And you can also put it into the chat. So I'm going to start with a comment by Jean Amé. He said, wow, this is great work. I've been very excited by this tool used, Sediment Fingerprint. I'm asking if the tool has more features that can help to assess other landscape structures and function.
Okay, great. So Jaime, I think that's a very fantastic question. So I think he can elaborate more on that. So does he mean that the tool, so the tool is not like one algorithm to praise, so it involves different steps. So if we can elaborate a bit on his questions, Jaime, if you are still on the call, maybe you can talk if you like. Thanks, Memosi. Thanks, Winifred. Yes,
okay.
Please.
All right. Thank you very much for the presentation, first of all. Yeah, I've been following, and it's really interesting. And just by the time I was following, just a thought came to me, and I asked myself if this tool can be extended to the other landscape connections and functions study. For example, linking this with the biodiversity assessment within the landscape, but also try to connect this with the degradation of the landscape in different angles. So that was my my wondering actually.
Yeah, definitely. So I really agree with that. And yeah, it's true that, so in that case, it will be a much more extended analysis where you consider different aspects, like you want to see the ecosystem services, or you want to consider maybe the role of agriculture or mining in polluting the river. So you can still compare the two only landscapes and then conduct possibly a kind of purposive sampling, where you would collect the data into the only degraded and non-degraded and then compare. So that's a kind of my contribution to your question. So I'm not sure I've addressed it.
Yeah, I think maybe I will contact you for more information and maybe learn how this can work.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, great, thank you. There's another comment here from Tony Bodacek in the US, and I should say Jeanne-Amé is in Belgium, so we've got people from all over the world here. Tony mentioned, I noticed you described the long time to filter the water without using vacuum or pressure. Was this due to lack of equipment or the particular choice you made for the procedure? And he mentioned a nice presentation.
Yes, thanks, Anthony. So I think the procedure required using that equipment. So I remember that the filtering apparatus were actually shipped from the US, so we couldn't get it here. So the procedure required using that equipment.
Other questions or comments?
Anthony, I'm not sure I've answered your question. So we've got some a team member who has done this study before, Christopher Dutton, and he was guiding on the equipment to use, but also on the sampling and all the other protocols involved.
Did that answer your question, Tony?
Yeah, that's fine. I was just, it seems that, I mean, with the water filtering that I have done in the past, I've used either vacuum or pressure. But of course that, as you said, that takes some equipment that maybe you didn't have. So I was just trying to think about you know, might be able to build something with what you have there to make the filtering go faster.
Okay, I understand. I got it now. I understood. Yeah. So we didn't have it. That's the answer now.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's something to think about, I guess, if it gets scaled up. I was wondering, Providence, if you think that this approach would be useful across the other catchments in Rwanda. There's so much work going on now with, the catchment management plans. And would you suggest this should be kind of like a regular monitoring activity to use to identify if erosion control interventions and investments were effective, or is it just too time consuming in terms of identifying those hotspots using the fingerprinting approach?
Yes, thanks for that question. So basically this was a second study of such a kind. I think it was also conducted in the Upper Nyabarongo catchment by the Rwanda Water and Forestry Authority, along with the Rwanda Water Security Program, I think. So they have conducted a similar study in the Upper Nyabarongo catchment, which is also quite huge. And we've actually been following the same procedures as we've got some guidance from the Rwanda Water and Forestry Authority. So this was a second study, and I think it is very well recommended. And I think with the IUCN project on restoring the Upper Nyabarongo, some of the sub-catchments like Sechoko, they are trying to conduct now a very particular sediment fingerprinting into now sub-catchments like Sechoko. But the tool, the approach requires, it's time consuming, as you already said, but also the budget. And people have to be very passionate about it. And you need all this equipment, you need to get the results well done, you need to have the data well collected, and you need to have all these, of course, the GIS layers. So we had friends from Burundi. They failed to conduct a similar study because they couldn't have the GIS layers that we were asking, and they collected the data wrongly, so they couldn't follow the GPS points in different small locations. So if you collect wrong data, then it won't work. Yeah, so it's time consuming. It requires a bit of people who understand it and the budget, but it's a recommended approach, of course.
Talking to myself. I'm welcoming I'm welcoming other people to ask questions or make comments. I do have another. Oh, yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Providence, for your nice presentation. Okay, so I'm using a cell phone.
No problem.
Okay, when you were doing some analysis of water and whatever, did you target some methods or simple you sample and you analyze everything?
Yes, thanks Antoine for such a great question. So we also had the list of metals. So we had a list of metals to be detected by the Rwanda Standards Board. So we had provided them with a list of particular metals to analyze from our samples.
Okay. Okay.
Good. While other people are thinking of other comment or question, I wanted to ask you, Providence, your project here, this topic really lends itself to linking science to policy. And I'm wondering if you see any uptake of your findings in terms of the catchment management planning or any direct interventions in those those red areas on your map to reduce the erosion. And maybe could you also talk about how you think that relationship should happen between the researcher doing the project and linking it to the policymakers?
Yeah, what you are saying is a bit of a complex question, but you also know that this project has ended. So the problem with these short-term projects is that we implement something, then we go. But of course, at least with this one, we've published the data. So the map is online and it can be accessible by anyone. And regarding to policy, of course, it's very possible if the other projects can maybe use our results or not to, we couldn't develop the policy documents or the policy briefs. So the project has ended before we had reached that step. But I would say that building on the hotspot map, there may be some policy briefs to be developed, but also they need to be disseminated and maybe validated by different stakeholders, which is another step, another new project to do that. Yeah, I'm not sure if I have answered you correctly.
Yeah, I'm always very interested in that link between the research and research uptake. Yeah, thank you. And I agree, policy briefs are important there. There's also another comment from Tony. He was saying the sediment data might be useful to compare to sediment that has been collected from the bottom of Lake Kivu to assess the contribution of Sebeya to lake sediment. So another application of your data set. And yeah, maybe you can comment on that.
Yeah.
Any comments or?
So this is Tony. I know that there have been some lake sediment analysis that has been done and at the north end of the lake, some very specific, and there are some papers published about that might have, I don't know, but might have comparable data. So there might be some, a way to compare fingerprinting. Yeah.
That's very interesting.
correct.
Almost looking at like which catchments are the greatest contributors to, different water bodies, for example.
Yeah. Some of the sediment analysis that was done. I mean, it would be an interesting study to see if there's a link can be made between these, because I don't think that has been done yet. Not at that level, not the level of the catchment to the lake.
Very interesting. And then I saw that you also mentioned the African Center of Excellence for Internet of Things can help create an automatic sediment monitoring network. Maybe not with a fingerprint detail, but the seasonal load. So yeah, that's also very interesting. I find that really cool because I see like at University of Rwanda now there's building quite a bit of capacity and expertise in both handling big data sets and in using artificial intelligence or automated learning. And here, like with the ACE IoT, that suggestion is a really neat way to look at some interesting collaborations.
Yeah, and maybe using some kind of remote sensing, see, especially at the outlet, at the level of the lake where the river empties in its water. So maybe we need a kind of, as you said, an automatic tool, maybe remote sensing, using some satellite images that can detect the sediment amounts, especially at the lake. Because with the small streams, it's a bit hard with the shade from the trees. Yeah.
So I was thinking of small sensors that could essentially determine the amount of sediment. So not a fingerprint, but at least you could have a continuous record of how much sediment is coming down the streams. Yeah, I think that would be, and then you could instrument each of those different sub-catchments, and that would be very useful. Particularly when you think back to what actions would you take in the watershed to
and you could even set like thresholds to alert for when it's above a certain level where that could be an indicator that there's something bigger happening upstream, for example, where the erosion points are.
Yeah. Yep.
That's really cool. Other questions or comments? Anybody else? It's close to 4, and we always try to keep this to our time limit. Any other last quick comments or questions for Providence? All right.
So
well, thank you.
I've shared the link to our paper. I've shared the link to our paper in the chat. So I think the map is among the free things to access because it's in the supplementary materials. So you can use that map. It's already georeferenced.
Good. And we can, I think I have the PDF. We can get the PDF if people want it. We can share it with people. I'm a big believer in access to science publications, so we can make that available. All right, well, thank you everybody. We had a great turnout today. I think at the maximum there were about 32 people. So it's really great to see how interested people are in sediments and in this really interesting research. Thanks so much for bringing it to us, Providence. We hope we hear from you again in the near future on your next exciting project. And meanwhile, if anybody else wants to give a presentation in the seminar, let us know. Daniel will get it organized. And have a great afternoon, everybody. Thank you.